All right, welcome in to what is this now? Fourth installment
Fourth
of
installment.
the B.G.G.F.P.L.M.L podcast. Very excited to join you after game week 3, entering into an international break, which we'll talk more about later. And we're glad to have Tolu on with us today. Tolu, welcome in.
Hello, hello. Good to see you guys after so long.
All the
Good to
way.
see you too. For those of you who don't know, Tolu, Donovan, and I all went to school together in undergrad for 2 years. So and it's really great to see his face again. It's been too long since we chatted, so we're looking forward to our discussion today.
Heck yeah. Before we dive in, you'll notice that we're still rocking some beards for the Beat the Average gauntlet. I actually, in fact, have also shaved my head.
Wow.
So the beard is longer than the head hair is currently, and I hope to keep that going for a bit more. But we actually have, after game week 3, still, let's see, 11 managers still in the Beat the Average gauntlet. Logan, Sean, Marcus, Rob, Alex, Keegan, me, Brandon, Charles, John, Chris, and Andrew moving on in the Beat the Average gauntlet. That's crazy that more than half of our league has beat the average all 3 game weeks. So very excited. Very excited about that. Very excited to keep it going. Brandon, why don't you kick us off with an FPL term of the week?
Yeah, happy to. Really quickly though, on the beards, they're getting long. I can start to kind of fluff mine out. I'm having to mention it to my clients now and be like, hey, just so you know, I have this until I start to underperform in fantasy football. And but most of them understand, so that's been good so far. I'm hiding it from a few partners, going on a lot of calls with the video camera off. So hopefully I'll have a bad week soon.
We appreciate the sacrifice, Brandon.
Yeah, I can trim this up. But term of the week. Term of the week for this week is benching headache. Uh, so I feel like this year has been interesting because a lot of people went for a little bit stronger benches than normal. I'm a manager who gets suckered into going for these like 4.0 million defender, 4.0 million defender, 4.5 midfielder, like almost every season. And this is the first season where I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have a little bit more strength on my bench, which ended up being the right call because I also had dumb decisions like Kwanzaa and Nkunku and Solanke who got injured. And so having players come off the bench has been great, or at least having players available for that. But in the past, I know it's happened for me. I'm sure it's happened for some other people as well. You kind of have like this 50-50 toss up. You make the wrong call. The guy who you start gets a 2-pointer. The person who you have on your bench gets like an 8, 9, 10-pointer. I remember I did that a year or two ago where I benched Martinelli away to Liverpool, and he got like a goal and an assist, and multiple bonus points. I just restarted up again a fantasy football league with Donovan, and now he can speak to benching Devon A-Chain for 50 plus point games last year. So we all have our experiences of benching headaches, some worse than others.
Yeah. Nice. I do remember the HN benching.
Yeah, not a fun time for you. But that's our FPL term of the week is benching headache. It hasn't hopefully been too big of a problem so far early in the season for people, but game week 4, there's a lot of good fixtures, a lot of good home fixtures. Some people might have to make some decisions on who to bench. And then, certainly as we all get further along in the season, every once in a while, there's a player that emerges as a really good like 5.0, 5.5 option, and that can be difficult. So, definitely do give a shout out in the group if you have a benching headache that goes awry. But something to keep in mind is it's sometimes a good problem to have because at least it means if you have an injury or something else in your squad, then you at least have a player who can come. But Tolu, do you have any thoughts on that? Any past experiences with benching headaches that went well, didn't go well, anything of that nature?
You had a couple of benching headaches in my FPL fantasy career. I think I've had too many probably why I took a year out, where I was just like, I can't seem to get the right players on the pitch and on the bench. But I think most recently, last game week, I definitely had a transfer headache, taking out Haaland, hoping that Nicholas Jackson, Cole Palmer, and Mo Salah would get me points. But he scored another hat trick. I had to watch it with a lot of pain, a lot of regret. So the closest I've come to a benching headache this season is definitely a transfer headache, taking Haaland out before he scored a hat trick. So yeah, I've had my fair share.
Well, don't worry, Tolu. We will definitely get to your decision on that front in a little bit. But for now, why don't we go on to our question of the day? Donovan, why don't you kick that off?
Yeah. I mentioned at the beginning that we have now entered into an international break. So game week 4 is not until September. What is that now? September 21st. So, or wait, no, sorry, 14th.
14th.
Yep, September 14th. So no games this weekend, but coming back the following weekend due to some international duties. So the question of the day is, what do you guys do to keep your mind off or on FPL during international breaks?
Yeah, so for me, I don't know. Like, I feel like you can get burned out pretty easily with FPL if you're just constantly listening to the content. So I'll listen to maybe like a podcast here, a podcast there for like an hour from going on a run, just a little bit. But I like to mix it up and not focus too much on FPL during the break. I also have just this terrible habit of knee jerking prior term of the week in order to catch price rises or avoid price falls at the beginning of the international break. Super risky, right? Because there's so many injuries that happen during these. But that's something I feel like I'm like progressing as a manager in recent years. Is I think in the past I would view all international breaks as being the same, and I would kind of approach them all the same way. But this time I think that it's possible to be like, okay, well, international breaks that are earlier in the season, you might have a little bit less of an injury risk because the players are still kind of fresh from their preseason training. They haven't gone through so many fixtures yet. And so if you're going to do kind of a risk and do an earlier transfer in order to catch those price rises, still a risk, but like maybe one that is a little bit more acceptable versus like an international break that's 2/3 of the way through the season. Maybe you want to hold off a little bit more there. So kind of like taking some of that strategy in. Um, uh, Full disclosure, I did make an early transfer this time, so maybe I'm just trying to talk myself into that not being a terrible decision. But for me, I think just using the break in order to actually like step away from FPL for a week or two and not have to worry about that, and instead worry about my fantasy football team. So it's when one thing comes, another goes.
Yeah. How about you, Tolu?
No, we lost you for a second. How about you as far as international breaks?
Can you hear me now? I
Yep.
think my app.
Yes.
Yeah, I also try to take my mind off FPL. I definitely empathize with the idea of burnout. I think sometimes when my mind is on it for way too long, you definitely reach a part of the season where you think, I'll just leave my team, see what happens. But yeah, during the international break, try to take some time away from it. Definitely keep an eye on the injuries. I've been burnt a few times by international break injuries, so that's something that I still keep a keen eye out for. I think it was last year when Enciso, it felt like he was about to have a breakout season. I brought him in, and then during the international break, he got injured and then was out for the rest of the season. So I've been burned by that, so I still keep my eye on the injuries. But yeah, try to take my mind off FPL so I don't get burnt out too early in the season. It's kind of how I treat it.
That's awesome. I don't necessarily have a strategy, but I do feel like I still watch too much stuff and listen to the podcasts and browse Reddit. What I like about that is like I get to actually see like what international games are going on. So like I think if without it, I would have no idea like what was actually being played during the international break. So I do like to stay up to that and kind of see like, what's going on there. I will say that my strategy though does shift into like later, like I do try to do a little bit more research once we hit like Wednesday of next week or like Thursday, because it's like there's a lot to catch up on too. So like just knowing that going into that one, spending a little bit more time and seeing, okay, what actually did happen here. I usually like to wait on the transfers too, but this time around I did make early transfers.
Okay.
Ended up taking them, so for a -4.
Yeah. I feel
Yep.
like everyone went into this season thinking like, oh man, perfect squad to start, gonna bank those 5 transfers, super overpowered, but that's a possibility now. And, within a few game weeks, everyone's like pushing the -4 button, like, all right, let me fix this team.
Yeah, 5 transfers. I was so excited to do that, and then had a couple of you know, not not benching headaches in the FPL term, but benching problems in like real life term. So
Yeah, indeed. But like, think of what could have been. I mean, Kwanzaa, Liverpool asset, 3 straight
it was
clean
the right
sheets.
move.
I feel strongly that it was a good thought process, but did not pay off. Anyway, let's move on to our manager spotlight. We have Tolu here with us. We are super blessed, super fortunate to have him here. As he mentioned earlier, he had taken a 1-year hiatus, really trained, developed his craft, came back last year stronger than ever. Really, from being relegation zone to pushing for the title, it was a true like Leicester City-esque turnaround.
Yeah,
So Tolu, you spent the first, let's see, so you moved to London in 2018 and you've been there
yeah,
ever since.
yeah.
Were you a Prem fan before going to the UK? Like walk me through that. Like how's it been living in London itself? Just how is England? How's your soccer fandom, I guess, grown since being there?
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always been well, first of all, great to be on the podcast. And really great to see you guys. It's awesome to reconnect with old friends. Yeah, so I moved to London right after Cornell in 2018. What brought me here was I wanted to do a master's after my undergraduate degree. So I thought I'd come to the UK, get a bit of a change of scenery, and also just go for the 1-year master's rather than 2 years. So that's what brought me over to this side. In terms of my Prem fandom, I've always been a football fan, from ever since I can remember. So I'm an Arsenal fan, as you can see from the jersey. Um, but funnily, I have pictures of myself in a United shirt. I don't know how that happened, and I think conveniently I've lost the picture. So I've been a soccer fan
Nice.
from ever since I can remember. My mom used to tell me stories about how I would cry every time Arsenal lost. I was quite an emotional fan, but I think after a super long trophy drought, I lost all emotion for Arsenal, and there was a season where I was just like, I'm just watching them because they're the team I support. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's a lot of crying, man. I mean, what was it like crying every week for like 38 weeks?
it was tough. It was tough, honestly, and going to school with your friends saying, "Why do you support Arsenal? You've been trophyless for 15 years at the time." Because I started supporting Arsenal, I think, just after we had won our Premier League the last time in 2003, when we still had the likes of Thierry Henry, Cesc Fabregas, Van Persie. So I came in at the wrong time. Things are picking up for Arsenal, which is great. But yeah, I've always been a soccer fan from ever since I was quite young. Yeah, then I moved to the UK. And yeah, this is where soccer was born. So it's the main sport here, which I've really enjoyed. I play football here as well with my company and with a club every Saturday, which is good fun. So very classic, like we train on Tuesdays, go to a game on a Saturday, then hang out with the lads after the game, type of thing. And that's been really, really fun. I think slightly different to the soccer I played in the US. I think coming to the US, I learned a lot about being an athlete, but coming to the UK, it is a little bit more technical, still very physical, but very technical. Having played against other people from Europe, it's been it's been really fun. But yeah, to answer your first question, I've been a football fan ever since I can remember. It was great when it came to the UK and as well to the US, and it felt like, people were finally getting into soccer. And I was like, hey, I finally have something to talk about with people, with you guys, with Rob, and kind of get into that, watching Premier League games at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And then yeah, I've kind of continued that passion for the game coming to London. I think being in the UK just kind of fans the flame almost. That's the biggest thing here.
Yeah, dude, I'm glad you mentioned that. I feel like so when we were in college, there used to be a co-ed soccer team for our Christian fellowship. And one
Yeah,
thing that everyone saw when they saw me play is that guy's an athlete. So I'm glad you used that term specifically because that is how I think of myself as well. So yeah, maybe not the technical skill, but sure, athlete, 100%.
yeah.
Um, and I wish so much that like Donovan and me and Rob were more into the Prem and just European football in general more when we
Yeah.
were in college because I used to joke around all the time with Dami and I'd be like, "Oh man, did you catch the Fly Emirates versus Yokohama Tires game yesterday?" Because they always have like the sponsors emblazoned on
That's
their shirt.
awesome. Yeah,
But
yeah.
I like wasn't into it all back then. I feel like we could have had some awesome conversations. So walk me through a little bit then of like how soccer is different in the UK versus the US, maybe a little bit on like some like local clubs and how people support those, and just kind of like what your experience has been around like soccer culture there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, soccer is it, like I said, it's the main thing here. And I think you can you can make friends or enemies depending on the club that you support. I use enemies very loosely, right? But it's definitely a great conversation starter. It'll be the kind of thing where, I'm talking to someone, soccer comes up, they tell me they support Tottenham. I'm like, well, that means we can't be friends because I'm an Arsenal fan, right? So we just cannot be friends. But yeah, it's a big thing here. I live in East London. I live quite close to the West Ham Stadium in Stratford. I'm like 2 stops away. So every Saturday when there's like a home game, I sometimes make the mistake and forget that there's a home game and I go to Stratford and it's just packed with people, people chanting on the trains, they've gotten to the game like 2 hours earlier. And even when you go around London on a weekend, there's so many clubs in London, not just in the Premier League, right, but also in the lower divisions as well. There is kind of a hype around match weekend. So you definitely see that. You see people in their droves with their jerseys, some old fans, young fans, everything in between. And that's just kind of a normal weekend here in the UK. It's a normal weekend. I I went to an Arsenal game a couple years back. It was at the Emirates Stadium. We lost to Brighton, and ironically, Leandro Trossard, who's now at Arsenal, scored in that game. Um, I went there because one of the partners in my company, he has season tickets and he couldn't make the game, so he gave them to me. So got really good seats, and I ended up talking to the lady and her son who was sitting next to me, and they were like, "Yeah, we come to every single Arsenal home game every single weekend. It's just a normal Saturday for us, right? Like it's for them, it's like going to the grocery store. They just come in, scan in their tickets, sit and watch the game, and then go for a pint afterwards. So it's very much ingrained in the culture. It's very much the big thing here. Um, and yeah, it's just been amazing being part of that and yeah, meeting so many people through it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, I think a lot about like Luton Town's stadium, right? And it's just
Mm.
literally in the neighborhood. Apartment buildings are abutting it from like all sides. And the incredible culture shock that European sports fans are going to get when they come to the US for the World Cup. And the stadiums are like an hour away from the
Outside the
city.
city.
There's like these massive parking lots that stretch on for miles in all directions around them. It's so different, right? But that's awesome to hear. It's like it's really interesting hearing about the culture from your perspective, somebody who's lived there for a while and who's really lived kind of in a lot of different places around the world. That's I think something that's kind of unique and really interesting about you. Where can you like map me through where you've lived and studied
Yeah.
as you've dotted around?
Yeah, so born in Nigeria, so I was there till I was 7. Then moved to South Africa after that, and that's kind of where I spent my formative years. So that's where I did high school. So I was there from age of 7 to the age of 18. At which point I then moved to the US. We went to college together. So I was in the US from 2014 to 2018, and then 2018 moved to the UK and been here ever since. So yeah, I've been quite fortunate to travel around with studies and work, I guess. Um, and yeah, it's been very interesting just experiencing different cultures. I can't say much about Nigeria and the football culture there, but even in South Africa, that was the sport I played in high school. That was, apart from rugby, that was the other big sport back there. Coming to the US again, it was growing the time I was in the US, and I think even now when I've been back, it just feels like there are a lot more people who are interested in soccer. And then coming to the UK, which is, the home of football, even though football hasn't come home yet. But yeah, coming to the UK, and kind of being in the thick of things, as it were, has been a great experience as well. So yeah, I've been all over the place. But yeah, I think the UK is the place I've been in the longest after South Africa. So longer than the US now, which is interesting.
Wow. Yeah, time flies. It's kind of crazy to think about how long, we've known each other now, post college versus in college, even. Time really,
Yeah.
it just goes, man. But yeah, one of my clients, one of my big clients, he lives and works in the UK, and so all during the Euros, we were like messaging back and forth, like, "Is it coming home? Is it coming home?" And he was like, "No, I can't even allow myself to believe it." And yeah, second Euros in a row. Okay,
Yeah,
but
it was
they
tough
for
here in the
sure.
UK with the second Euros in a row. The first one, it was again the finals usually on a Sunday, and I remember getting to the office on a Monday, and it was literally radio silence for the first 12 hours. No emails, no comms. It felt like people were mourning the loss of someone really dear to them. It was really, really bad. I guess the second final loss, they took it a bit better. Still wasn't great. But yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't come home yet. Hasn't come.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, but UK soccer, super interesting to hear your perspective, uh, and just really, again, happy to have you on. I do want to pivot over to FPL for a minute, though, and talk about some of the decision you alluded to earlier, which was to play the free hit Hollandless in game week 3. This is the second season in a row now that you've kind of like blew some of your chips in the beginning of the season. You built a big lead last year, and kind of like a marathon runner, just coming out, super strong, and then trying to fend people off at the end. Here you are now, and it maybe wasn't as successful this time. Walk me
No,
through the thought process. What was going through your head, going Hollandless, and just choosing to play your free hit in game week 3.
yeah,
Didn't work out, but good strat.
yeah. So it didn't work out, which is, let bygones be bygones. But my thought process was first game week, I kind of scraped to victory. I think I won by like 2 points or something. So I was like, okay, this is okay. Keep the same team. Let's see what happens. Second week was not great at all. Certainly did not beat the average. I was well behind. I had Haaland in the first 2 weeks, as you usually do. New season. He usually comes out guns a blazing. He's done that for the last 2 seasons, been in the Premier League. So I had Haaland in, and I just thought, you know what, there's some great players, especially in the midfield. I felt like Haaland at 50 million is quite expensive and doesn't give me much flexibility in the rest of my team. I mean, I say that now that he scored a hat trick, that statement almost feels like a moot statement, but he felt quite expensive, and I just felt I wanted a little bit more flexibility in my midfield. So I thought I was happy to take the hit. And also, I just thought, you know what? He scored in 2 games in a row. He might hit a blank in the third game week. I will look like a genius taking him out and bringing him some midfielders. But then he scored a hat trick. Yeah, in terms of using chips early in the season, I think the one thing when I took the year off fantasy, I think the one thing I got wrong was overthinking things. So thinking, okay, I'm going to save my chips until, a double game week, etc., etc. And it just never worked out for me. So while I do apply a bit of strategy to my FPL predictions and my FPL choices, I try to be a little bit more unpredictable. I think, yeah, me using a free hit was nothing anybody expected. But that was kind of my reasoning. I thought Haaland scored 2 weeks in a row. He's quite expensive. He might hit a blank in his third game week. I should have known it was against West Ham. He always scores against West Ham. I'll get some really good players in the midfield, and hopefully they'll get me some points. But unfortunately, it didn't work. But I guess that's fantasy football for you.
Yeah, and I love the punts, right? Like I think that if everybody played the game the same way, like it wouldn't be interesting. And when people kind of just like randomly use a chip against Donovan late in the season or something like this, you love it. And I think it injects a lot of excitement into our league and just makes it more fun for everybody. So kudos to you, man. Didn't pay off, but I love I love going for it like that. With that, Donovan, why don't you take us into our next segment?
Yeah. So, well, first I want to say we are not officially encouraging using chips against Donovan late in the league, like late as a part of this podcast. So, just want
I mean, if
to
it
throw that
happens, though.
disclaimer out there.
I think it's a great suggestion.
Just like week after week after week, that would be, oh man, that would not be fun. But we'll see. It would make it exciting. Our next segment is just around the league, looking at a couple of key stories that happened in the past week to kick things off. I'm happy to report that the Peterson brothers have now they have a different score through 3 weeks. So after 2 ties to start the season that the league took note of, Chris Peterson has pulled ahead on the back of a Chris Wood goal and a Muniz blank. That was one of the main differences between the teams. And Chris has pulled ahead from Andrew by 5 points. So yeah. Any thoughts there or notes?
No, look, I mean, from discussions with the league front office, they're about this close to stepping in. So it's nice to see a little bit of differentiation there. Isaac coming in and saving Chris, Muniz coming in some ways saving Andrew because Muniz's goal might have led to some repercussions. So, it's good to see the Peterson starting to diverge a little bit, even if just by a minutia, and we'll see how that continues the rest of the season. But in all seriousness, I think both of them are off to pretty good starts, and I'd love to see that from both of them. In one of the games that kind of caught my eye, other than for Tolu's use of the free hit, I would give my second week in a row shouting out Matt Mahoney because I think a lot of people who were dishing Nkunku, like myself, dropped down to Rogers last week, and he did not go that route. He dropped down to Onana, who came in there, scored again, got some bonus points, and I think Rogers had like a 2-pointer and Onana had like an 8 or 9-pointer. And so you're looking at like a 6-7 point difference right there by going with the differential choice. And I think that if there's one thing that we can kind of learn from early season, both last year and this year, right? Like sometimes it pays off to go with the early chips, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it pays off to go with the differential. And in this case, like all the content creators, everybody was saying to go Rogers. Matt went somebody different, and it really paid off. And I think, it could have meant the difference between a win and a loss. So again, shout out to Matt for a really good differential decision.
Sweet. And the last one to highlight is actually my matchup against Alex Kesley, our league's newest member. I had the unique pleasure of spending this weekend in Denver with Alex for his birthday. I flew out, all right. I left my house at like 3 a.m. Took a flight 5 a.m., got into Denver, and went directly to a bar where we watched the Man City West Ham game with a handful of fans from with Man City jerseys and a couple of fans with West Ham jerseys. So that was pretty cool. They were giving out free Modelo at 10 a.m. So that was pretty fun. And it was just a good time to hang out with a close friend of mine and also have a bit of FPL fun as we were doing it. One of the highlights I'll actually make from this game week, I narrowly won this game only because of a 95th minute goal from Southampton. Alex had double Brentford defense. And without that goal from Southampton to wipe out the clean sheet, I would have been toast. So very thankful for Southampton coming in at the 95th minute. I was in line for my rental car while this happened, texting Alex, and then got to see him and hang out. We had a great time together. So very fun stuff. Love to see the excitement building across the U.S. and across the world for our FPL mini league. So why don't you wrap us up, Brandon?
You bet. It's been a super fun start to the season. I feel like there's been so many viable options and paths. People who went Holland only, Salah and Holland, free hitting in none of them, or Hollandless. Lots of different options people could have taken. All of them have led to like pretty decent outcomes. In all honesty, I was somebody who went Holland only, and I was definitely feeling that, taking a loss to Marcus this week on the back of Salah's 17-pointer, but like it's been a really great start. So really happy with that. Tolu, do you have any last words before we head out? Any last minute advice, guidance, anything to say?
Yeah, don't take Haaland out of your team. Keep him in. Feels like he scored a lot of goals this season. And yeah, look, it's great to be on the podcast. Great to see you guys, and I'm hoping that I can pick things up again this season. I know this is a slow start compared to last season. I think last season I went 11 games without a loss, which was a bit absurd.
That's wild.
It was a bit absurd, but I always say, it's a long season, 38 games. It's a very long season. So yeah, for any managers out there who think they've made a mistake, don't worry. There's still a lot of game weeks left. A lot of game weeks left. A lot of drama. So yeah, those would be my words.
Nice. Speaking of undefeated, we've only got 2 teams remaining that are undefeated in our league, 3-0. Logan Stevenson and Marcus Weeks, who actually is in the top 100,000 in the world. I think he's at right around 70K right now. So pretty exciting stuff going on around the league.
That's huge. That's huge. Well, anyway, everyone, thank you again for listening to the podcast. And good luck on the international break. Take some time for yourselves, and we'll see you again in about 2 weeks from now.
See y'all later. Thanks, Tolu.
Thanks, guys.